Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Ideas for the Workplace. I'm your host, Hedieh Azad, and my guest today is Louise H. Reid. As the founder and chief empowerment officer at LHR Leadership Development and Coaching, Louise is on a mission to humanize leadership, one conversation, one workshop, one workplace at a time, so that great work gets done and everyone feels seen, valued, and heard. With a heads-on, hearts-in approach, Louise facilitates positive transformation in leaders' communication abilities, relationships, and capacity to cultivate inclusive, high-performing teams through self-awareness, mindfulness, and strengths-based methodologies. Residing in Ottawa, Canada, this HR and leadership expert has 20 plus years of experience in the high-tech, aviation, utilities, and nonprofit sectors. Louise holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Waterloo, is a certified HR leader, and is a certified organizational coach through the University of British Columbia and the International Coaches Federation. She has additional certifications in wellness, emotional intelligence, and mindfulness, and is also a 2 times #1 Amazon best-selling author and proud mama to 4 boys. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
So lots of accomplishments. And I want to dive deep into your most recent book, Humanizing Leadership, which I absolutely love. And I think it's a must read for every leader. So I want us to start off by telling me why you decided to write this book.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thanks for that kind introduction. And the question you asked is a simple question, and it's not such a simple answer. And I feel like the song that comes to mind that describes why I wrote this book is A Long and Winding Road by the Beatles. So that the story really is a long and winding road. To keep it somewhat brief, I think it's really a culmination of my 20 plus years working in corporate, having been an HR leader and leadership coach with others and for others in a variety of organizations, seeing so many leaders in my office and hearing their challenges. I think more significantly, having their employees in my office, hearing about the impact of the well-intentioned, ill-equipped leader. So they had well-intentioned, ill-equipped leaders causing harm to them, affecting their productivity, affecting how they feel when they walk into work each day, their happiness and joy and, their well-being being compromised, slowly being eroded day after day as a result of their leaders not having the skill to lead well. And really what the moment that I knew I needed to write this book, that's a bit of the history. The moment I knew I needed to write this book was when my boss at the time, Julia Wad, passed away from a disease or the complications of a disease that had saved my sister's life 15 years prior. It was a bone marrow transplant that she had. She was the most incredible leader that I had ever had. The city of Ottawa knows very well. She was very well known and connected in the community. And when her light went out, I felt like everyone needed a Julia. And I felt like this was my way to be able to bring to the world the great leadership qualities and share what I learned from Julia to the world. So that's the short story as to why I wrote the book.
Oh, what a beautiful story and, testament to Julia's leadership skills that, she was an inspiration for, this book. Really amazing. Love it. So you mentioned about, well-intentioned, but ill-equipped. Can you expand on that? What does it mean? What does it mean to be ill-equipped? And on the flip side of that, what are the skills that are required for these leaders to be successful and have happy and healthy employees in the workplace? People who are engaged and driven and motivated.
Really, really great question. So ill-equipped, I would say that many of us can relate this story of having a manager or an individual contributor be promoted into a management position because they either wanted to climb the corporate ladder, because that's what we do in our culture. Progress means an upward trajectory versus maybe just going sideways and growing widthwise in your career. It's always upward. So someone getting promoted into that role with budgets having been cut significantly over the last many years, there aren't training courses then for these newly promoted managers. So maybe they can manage projects well. Hopefully they can manage projects well, but probably that as well as their technical skills, whatever kind of technical skills we're talking about, it's in high tech, technical skills associated with accounting and finance, or your technical skills associated with your area of expertise, whatever that subject matter may be. You're put into, you assume this leadership role, and we take for granted that these quote unquote soft skills, which I think need a rebrand. I think we need to call them power skills, not soft skills. But we take for granted that these are skills that we need to learn, that some folks need to hone actually quite significantly. And so the ill-equipped leader is someone who steps into one of these roles that may be a subject matter expert, can manage projects well, but they lack the skills to communicate effectively with others, to delegate work, to set expectations with employees, to really get to know the individuals on their team so they can source and really cultivate the strengths of the individuals that are on their team so that their employees are doing great work and feeling good at work. There's so much research in the strengths-based area of development and strengths-based work. For the last 75 years, Gallup has been studying strengths-based psychology and the impact of when people lean into their strengths more often at work, how individuals do better, teams perform better, and organizations do better. There are stats on that. The numbers escape me, but they are all very well researched and well documented. No one loses. So those are some examples of some of the skills then that these leaders who I'm calling ill-equipped are lacking. How are they supposed to know these things? They learned accounting or engineering or HR in school. If they learned HR, well, hopefully they've learned some of the skills that will equip them well to lead others. But these other leaders, we're setting them up. What are we setting them up for? It's really quite a perfect storm to put them into these positions, or we're setting them up for failure, really. And we're putting our employees in harm's way. And I think it's irresponsible. I think it's irresponsible of us to do that when we know the impact that can have, yes, on the business and on people's well-being. So you asked what skills are needed. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to know, so I just had quite a rant there about the ill-equipped piece. So I'd love to hear your sort of thoughts on what
I completely agree with you. And I would also add to that, appreciating and valuing and recognizing the employees. And when I hear some leaders say, well, they do their jobs, they're getting paid for it, so why do we need to recognize them? And I just cringe. Well, because they're human beings. Everyone wants to be appreciated and recognized. But like you said, that skill is never taught, and people never think of it. You mentioned something about strength-based, and in your book, you refer to, I think it's Clifton's strength-based. So can you tell me more about that? What does that entail, and how can leaders use that to find the strengths of their team members?
A great question. And this one is easy to get the information, harder, like any sort of leadership, the implementation of any new thing. The implementation part takes time and intention, but it's not hard in and of itself. So Gallup has created the strengths survey called CliftonStrengths. The survey is a quick and easy and inexpensive, like I'm talking like $30 Canadian to take. So leaders can take it themselves. And I always recommend, and with my leadership coaching clients, I always start with them. And so humanizing leadership, I'm advocating for an inside out approach to leadership. That effective leadership first starts with you. So it's about being able to lead self appropriately before you can start to look out and lead others well. And so I'll start, the same approach the same steps would be relevant for individuals on the team. Go online, do the assessment, and you get your top strength. The purpose of this is to create some self-awareness. Oftentimes, we're not able to shine the light on the things that we do extremely well because they come to us quite naturally. If you think about some of the things that others might compliment you on or say that you do really well at work, many times we will dismiss it or, oh, well, that's, it's no big deal. It's not a problem. It was really easy. I did it really quickly. Those moments are happening. It's often a sign that there's a strength play there. So the CliftonStrengths tool enables you to sort of call out, shine the light on those strengths, name them. Then you can really claim them. And then you can aim them appropriately and use those strengths in a more intentional way to help you achieve your goals. So an example would be if you're extreme, and sorry, maybe I'll talk about the team next. So if you do this then with your team, you've got really clear view into the strengths of your team members as individuals. So you know how to support them in helping them lean more into their strengths, use their strengths to help them maybe amp up the areas that aren't strong. And then when you know what your team profile is, if you've got folks on your team who you intuitively know and you've seen through their work that maybe attention to detail is not their forte, harping on them about attention to detail and them needing to focus more on attention to detail may not be an appropriate way for them to pay more attention to detail. It likely is an area that's going to a lot of work and have little impact on improving their attention to detail. You've got other members on the team whose attention to detail is extremely strong, and you share these kinds of results with the whole team. You start understanding how you can leverage then the strengths of different team members for different tasks. Or how if I did not have a strong attention to detail, which actually is true, I learned then who on my team I can lean on in those times where I have to still be paying attention to detail. There's still reports I have to do. There's still data I have to compile. My go-to now is I'm going to be leaning on you and asking for your help and just reviewing something for me before I submit it to the boss. Having those kinds of opportunities to create self-awareness and others' awareness and have a really safe conversation around those types of strengths and development areas creates opportunity for connection, belonging, ability to own your own strengths and develop more as an individual. So there really are some very significant individual leadership, individual and team benefits from just doing this $30 survey.
That's amazing. What stands out for me in all of this is, that sense of belonging that you mentioned and, more collaboration between team members. But that leads me to a question. So in my mind, this can only work in an environment where there's psychological safety and people feel they can trust each other. So then the question is, how do leaders build this environment of trust?
You're full of such rich questions. And it's such a good question because it's hard to really wrap your hands around what trust even means, isn't it? We know it when we have it. We know it when we feel it. So if you and I trust one another, we know when we feel it. We know when it's not there. But it's this sort of amorphous thing that you can't really just put in a container. And so I start with that because it can be a difficult thing for some folks to really understand what it is. If that's the case, I'd really go into reflect on your own experiences in relationships that have felt trusting. You don't just one day, it's almost like just one day you sort of wake up and you realize that you do trust someone. You don't trust someone because they tell you to trust them. I don't trust you because you say trust me. If you say that, I probably would be more suspicious of you, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it starts from day one. And as a leader, this is part of that inside out, that leading self that I start all of my, I believe, well, the one leadership foundation starts, is knowing your values, living by your values, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Sharing your values with your team members. So with my teams, I used to, as soon as a new team member came on board, we would have a team session where we would talk about our values, each of our values. We would do our strengths finder, and we would talk about our language of appreciation. I didn't include that that's another really great tool, languages of appreciation, to get an understanding of who are you? What's underneath the surface, underneath the hood, and how can we help you be your best? So it starts by making intentional choices to put essentially as a leader, you need to go first. You need to trust first. You need to make deposits into the trust bank account first, consistently. And then when and if there's a requirement that you need to lean in and make withdrawals from that, there are deposits from which to make a withdrawal, right? There's a balance. There's a balance there that you can make a withdrawal. If you're trying to build trust at a time of difficulty, change, uncertainty, I'd wish you much luck.
Yeah. Too late for that.
Too late.
So, in your book, you divide, the leadership aspect into three pillars. And I like how you talk about the four characteristics of a leader. So can you tell me what those characteristics of a good leader are?
Yeah. So the lead self, the lead others, and lead the way. The book is broken into 10. Those are the three practices, the three pillars, and then there's 10 practices. And together, those build the 4 C's of humanizing leadership. And that's courage, character, compassion, and curiosity. And I came to those through research. I've got a background. My first degree is in biology, so I like science. I do like research and evidence-based tools and evidence-based anything. But also that I like being able to combine that and mix that with real world experience. So these are the things that I saw in Julia. These are the characteristics that when I did a really informal poll on LinkedIn and asked people, who's the best leader that you ever had? Describe them to me. How did they make you feel? What did they do that was different, that made them stand out? These are the characteristics that continued to come through. These are the threads that are really pulled through. And I think these are the characteristics that we're needing in leaders of our world today. Our world it's always changing. It's always changing. And it has accelerated and gone in a very different trajectory since COVID, hasn't it? If we think about the social, cultural factors, technological factors, demographics changing, as they always do, which is wonderful to have new generations in the workforce. The demands are different. The expectations of employees are different. The expectations and demands on leaders, I believe, are like never before. And therefore, it's going to require some additional skills to be able to navigate this effectively, like navigate the world of leadership effectively. And so that a little bit of history, I guess, and context as to where those 4 C's of humanizing leadership came from.
Great. You mentioned, the expectations of employees have changed too, especially after COVID and people working remotely for a long time. And I know this is still a hot topic, but I know that, a lot of workplaces are having their employees come in either 2-3 days a week, sometimes even 5 days a week. And I know that there's a lot of resistance on the part of employees for the most part. And I wonder how that ties into, how as a good leader, you can create that balance for your team.
Yeah, I think this is why it is an example of how important it is to have an established bank account of trust. It's not to say that, if there's a leader, someone is listening who's a new leader and hasn't established that yet, don't dismay. But I think this is where understanding what your role is as a leader is valuable. So for a leader being able to take a step back and understanding, what is your job? Who am I as a leader? What do I fundamentally believe in? My two values, I've narrowed it down to family and freedom. Family is more of a feeling. So I don't think my work is my family. It's a feeling of family. So for me, it's about the word family is about connection. It's about trust. It embodies a whole bunch of values, but that feeling of family and strength and stability that I like. And then freedom is about agency. And so agency of voice and choice. So I bring those into these types of conversations with employees when I'm talking about thorny, difficult topics that don't have a clear answer. I lead with my values. This is where courage is really important too, right? So being able to know yourself and lead with your values enables you to have harder conversations with greater courage. Doesn't mean that you're fearless. Can help you fear less. Because it's grounded in something, your conviction is grounded in something and rooted in something strong. And so more specifically, these kinds of conversations, I think we need to get better as leaders about creating a compelling vision for the future. You don't have to like it. You as my employee or as a member of my team doesn't have to like it. It's great if you do. We want you on board. This is where we're going. This is where our team is in that journey. And this is your unique role. This is how your skills and strengths are going to help us rock. Are you on? Are you in? We'll go far. We have to give that kind of agency. And I think it's a responsibility as well for employees to actually accept their place on that journey. And it's a leader's job to create the conditions to have those kinds of conversations. So that's one thing. Quite, create a compelling vision. That sounds still sort of lofty, a bit more granular. I think it's very important to be able to share what's in scope of something that we can debate and have some negotiations over, you and I as employee leader. And this is what's out of scope. So this is the decision that there's 3 days a week, and this is why. And so I think clarity over those things are really important. It's not debatable. You can share your thoughts and feelings and challenges. We can try and overcome some of those, but it's not debatable. What we can, however, work with and co-create some resolution and solutions around there's this other pieces of the pie. And that's when I think we have to spend the bulk of our time focusing. It's not to minimize or erase the reality of the hardship that one might be feeling now have to go into the office 3 days a week. Not at all. But we have no control over that. So let's focus on the things that we do have control and agency and voice and choice over. Let's choose to spend our time and energy there. That's my
So I like that in the sense that, you worry about things that you can control, not things that you can't control, which is like a decision that has been made and it's non-negotiable. But some people may ask, well, why was that decision made? Why is it that for 2 years during COVID, we all worked from home and we were productive? Like research was showing that everyone is more productive. And now like we're being asked to come back to the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week or, and what's the purpose? I hear that a lot. For me personally, I feel like I need to go to the office at least 1 day a week just to get out of my office here at home and just to talk to a few people. But at the same time, I understand that many people may not like, and are wondering, why was that decision made?
Yeah.
Like, what's the reasoning behind it?
I think leaders need to be honest. Unfortunately, the leaders that I am kind of referring to, and I think leaders that you might be referring to, are somewhere in the middle. Most leaders are
Right.
middle, right? Even senior leaders usually have a leader on top, right? And so they may not even have full information.
You're right. Yeah.
You share what you can. You share whatever you can. And I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with saying whether you agree with it or not. Like you can say, I don't particularly agree with it, or I don't particularly like it. However, these are the reasons. And we get to choose. And how can we make the best of it? Again, not to sugarcoat. It's not to sugarcoat. Where I see a lot of what I've heard, a girlfriend of mine, she has had to go back to the office. I think 3 days. It's quite 3 days a week. Anyway, there's some negotiation that they've been able to have around what days they are and when they happen throughout the month, but about on average 3 days a week. And what she has been told, it just sounds a little fishy. It just sounds kind of made. The reason and rationale seems just a little arbitrary and made up. That's what I think, that lack of transparency and honesty about the real reasons. I think that's really what folks are probably having a response to. Don't treat me like a child. I'm not a kid.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's that lack of transparency that's the culprit here. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the reality is a lot of leaders want bums in seats, and they won't say, we just want bums in seats.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Yeah. So the next pillar in your book that you talk about is leading others. And, you talk about the power of the pause, which I loved. So I was just wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, yes, I love that you asked this
I love that.
question. It's taken me a long time in my life to truly understand the impact of pause. So what I mean by this is, like, in our fast-paced, always on, busy mindset, busy life, busy reality that we're all living, we, mentally, we're time traveling. Our minds are often not where our bodies are. So we're working away, we're thinking about, oh shoot, I need to pull this out for dinner tonight, typing away on our computers, and we hear a ding, we're thinking about, we go check out the ding while we're still writing the email that we just took a pause from to check out, to get the dopamine hit from the ding. We are doing this all just we're on a treadmill, a racing treadmill. And we're not really making a lot of intentional choices as we make these multitasking moves throughout our day. In doing so, we're often being quite mindless in how we choose our tasks, how we listen to others, how we respond to others. And it's not always really in our best interest personally or with our relationship. We think about, when we lose our cool, perhaps, someone that we love dearly. Pause there. So we're talking about, like, the power of the pause, a pause in between that initial feeling of rage, or a pause before the response. In that pause, there's choice. In that pause, there's space to choose a response. And that's why I say there's so much power, the power of the pause, because in the pause is that where there is an intention. Is what I'm about to do or say going to help or hinder my relationship? Is what I'm about to do right now going to help or hinder my ability to get the thing done that is due to my boss in 4 hours? So with creating the power of the pause is that it creates space in between your initial reaction and your response. And that leaves room for curiosity. And it leaves room for connection, leaves room for courage, so that we're not going in those moments where we really, in a meeting, for instance, where we really want to speak up, where we quote unquote should be speaking up because it's the right thing to speak up and say something. If we have that pause, our reaction, which our initial reaction is probably fear, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. Mm-hmm. And our reaction, not saying anything. If we create that pause, we can then make more of a mindful choice. Is this an act? Is this a moment where I need to be courageous? Is this where I need to be bold? Is this worth it to me to speak up? The consequences worth it? It's okay if the answer is no, the consequences aren't worth it. That's okay. That's a success in my mind, because it's still been an unintentional choice. But it might also be a moment where you realize, yes, this is worth it. If I don't speak up right now in this meeting and say this thing, I'm going to be brooding over it all night. I'm going to be ruminating over it tonight because I knew I should. And so again, even the power of the pause can still be happening even when there is silence, because it's happening within your own mind.
Yeah, it was amazing. So it's just being more mindful as a leader and not, in this world of multitasking and constantly being busy, just being mindful. I love that. We all need that.
We do. I think about a really specific example would be, I think of someone who I used to do work for, and she was a wonderful human being. I knew that she was. Her leadership, it didn't always show. That wonderful humanness didn't always show in how she showed up as a leader. In our one-on-ones, I would often stop talking mid-sentence because I could see that she was likely teamsing someone. She was always on Teams and sending messages. I would pause, like stop mid-sentence, and she didn't even realize that I'd stopped talking, that I had said it. I paused mid-sentence. She didn't inquire as to, do you want to finish that thought? Clearly not paying attention at all. Yeah. So that's an example of mindfulness as well, right? In the moment, right. Mindfulness. In the moment, mindfulness, like being able to be present and avoid the things, the dings, the rings, the distractions that could so easily pull us away. The power of the pause is momentary, right? In those moments that you're choosing, and it can become habitual then, right? When you practice it enough, it can become habitual, that you don't get pulled away because there's a pause before you move your mouse to click on the next window.
Yeah. And active listening, listening, especially in one-on-one meetings. Like, I can't even imagine. That's the whole purpose, to really connect with that person, and then not to be there and teamsing people. Like, that just defeats the whole purpose of the one-on-one meetings.
It really does.
Yeah. You talk about, unleashing the power of your people. So how would a leader do that?
Yeah. I think this, and in the book I talk about, I used to play basketball, and I had a dream actually of being the first woman in the NBA. Clearly that didn't happen because no one's heard of me before in basketball context. But I use that analogy because I think whether people like sports or don't, everyone can understand the concept of the coach is the coach. And if someone on the basketball court is really not doing a good job out there on the court, the coach doesn't jump in for them and play their position. The coach doesn't then pull them off the court, put them on the bench and say, I can do better. No. The coaches. The coach does a variety of things, uses a variety of tools to re-engage that person, do whatever they need to do to get the person, that player, back in, mentally in the game and performing. So this is about, similarly on our team, is we hire people to do a job. They have got a position. Let them play that position. Set them up with the right tools and skills, and or go and rock in their job. Be there for them when they are struggling. It's like the struggling player on the court, and the coach is there to do whatever they do. Be there for them. Likewise, be for them. A soft place to land, to fluff their feathers if they need a little bit of confidence, or help them out with some skill building if it's skill building they need, or troubleshoot with them if they're having a problem with a client and solving a client problem. But be there as a sounding board of what they need. So hire the right people. Recognize you hired them for that reason, and let them play that position. And this is also linking into the strengths. The CliftonStrengths conversation that we had earlier as well. Help them know who they are. Help them develop some self-awareness about where their strengths are and how they can rock work. And also where their lesser strengths might be hindering their ability to rock in their job. These are all, or a couple of ways to really help. It starts with a leadership mindset, knowing that your people are there to play their position, knowing that you are here to play your position, and then acting that way, showing up that way, leading that way, having conversations that way, so that your words and your actions align. So if you're saying, I'm going to let my team play that position, do you? Do you let that? Do you? Maybe you do. It might be worth asking them. It might be worth asking.
Yeah. I love the analogy of that basketball player and coaching and I think this ties back into leaders being ill-equipped and maybe not having coaching skills. So,
Yes.
going through a leadership development program is critical. And, if they don't have those coaching skills, maybe they can just have an external coach come in and help and, teach them coaching skills.
Yeah, I think the learning, a just-in-time sort of learning approach, I think, is really, really helpful in our busy realities now. I'm finding leaders are having a harder time carving out the time to dedicate to learning and developing. Because learning is one thing. You go on a course for 2 days, you might learn a bunch of stuff. Development happens when you do the thing. And that's where I'm seeing a degradation of people's abilities, not because they don't have the capability of doing so. It's just our reality doesn't allow for, it takes a lot of mental energy to do something new. Our brains are wired to do what's going to conserve our energy. Our brain uses 20% of our body's energy. So our brain wants autopilot. Our brain wants you to drive from here to there, from home to work, using as little brain power as possible. It's why we sometimes get places and think, I don't even know how I got here. Our brains are working beautifully. That's how they're designed. They're beautifully designed. That does mean that if I'm trying to have a coaching conversation with you and I'm not very skilled yet, I add the word yet, I'm not very skilled yet at having coaching conversations because I'm a new manager or it's a skill I've not developed as a leader. It's going to take more intention and energy and focus. And so I think this is where looking at skills in sort of bite-sized chunks and having a regular sort of cadence that your learning is ongoing and it never stops is perhaps a more reasonable and scalable way of going about your leadership development journey. And having a community, whether it's a coach, whether you hire a coach, whether you have someone in your workplace who is a coach or an HR person who might have some coaching skills, or a community of leaders. So a cohort, I've loved group coaching. Group coaching I find so powerful. I wish more organizations utilized group coaching. Because the power of having an organized, say once a month, 1.5 hour conversation with other leaders in your organization, where you bring forward challenges that you're having, you share what you tried, and other people provide their input. The coaches there sort of facilitate it, but it's a very rich kind of conversation and learning opportunity where you get to admit your fails, You hear other people admitting their fails, and you're dusting each other off and saying, try this. And let's come back next month and tell us how it went. So that's another way. And you don't need to have someone facilitated to start something like that. If you and a few leaders, in your workplace are keen on something like that, just start it together.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and it's also a sense of belonging in the workplace, sort of, not being afraid to fail because other people are there to support you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So one last question, Louise. What is your advice to new leaders? They're just starting. What is the most important thing they need to keep in mind?
Be brave, take risks, and have an open mind.
Love that. Amazing advice. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. Lots of important points on, in particular for me was the power of the pause and being mindful, which is something we're missing in this world today. So thank you so much. And how can people find you? How can people connect with you? And where can they find your book?
Okay. Well, thank you for that. People can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so you can look me up, Louise H. Reid. My website is humanizingleadership.com, and you can reach out that way and connect with me if you wish to send me a private message that way too. And you can get my book on Amazon, and you can also get my book through my website. So humanizingleadership.com will take you there as well, and you can purchase it. And I would love to hear from folks who've read the book. I love reviews. I love just private messages on hearing how the book resonates with folks, because this was a 4-year book writing expedition. It really was. And so hearing from readers on how the book has impacted them is a real reward for me.
Thank you so much, Louise. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.